They called us the power couple, house on the hill, careers that took up newspaper columns, a social life tailored to perfection. From the outside, Mira and I had it all. The travel photos, the fundraisers, the seamless conversations at cocktail parties. Inside, the house hummed with a different current. I just didn't know how dangerously charged it had become. The first sign was small and stupidly mundane. The gas stove in the kitchen began clicking at odd times. Mira would frown, wave her hand, and say, "It's nothing. The pilot light's acting up." I had it checked by a technician who shrugged and replaced a part. A week later, the same thing happened. He came back and said the wiring looked fine. He left with a warning nod. Sometimes these old houses get temperamental. I laughed it off. People mix up causes and effects when they don't want to see the obvious. It was only when my health started to wobble, insomnia that I couldn't explain, a faint metallic taste after meals, a dizzy spell while driving, that suspicions moved from fog to outline. I asked my doctor for a battery of tests. Stress, he said at first. But one lab result came back odd enough that he referred me to a specialist. The specialist's eyebrows rose. "Have you been exposed to heavy metals or unusual chemicals?" she asked, and I felt my stomach drop. I confronted Mira. Her face went slack, then practiced concern. "You need rest," she said. "Let me help." Her help came with lunches packed with electrolytes that tasted faintly of iron, cups of tea brewed from bags she swore she'd bought at a health market, and an insistence I sleep more. All normal behavior for a worried spouse. All, I later learned, precisely the cover someone would use if they were trying to make a pattern look like coincidence. The turning point was an overheard phone call. I wasn't snooping. My paranoia had climbed into the passenger seat and would not be ignored, so when Mira's phone vibrated and rang on the kitchen counter as I put out the trash, I answered it without thinking. Her side of the conversation was clipped, fast. Names were code. The voice on the other end said something like, "It's almost done." "Don't delay the flight," Mira replied. "He's suspicious. Keep it tidy. Later." There's a moment when language flips from uncertain to sinister. My hands were shaking. I put the phone back and watched the woman I'd built a life with slip into the other room, folding her face into practiced concern. I could have confronted her then. I didn't. I was too furious to be smart. Instead, I walked to the garage, breathed, and tried to form a plan that wouldn't let fury make me dumb. Step 1 was documentation. I started small and stayed careful. I kept a daily log, medicine she gave me, meals, times her friends visited, when the plumber came, and the little noises the house made at night. I took pictures of foil-wrapped detox lunches before I ate them. I recorded conversations where she grew flustered and avoided my questions. It felt petty and forensic, but I realized I needed proof that would stand up to interrogation. Proof that would transform my paranoia into something a court or law enforcement could act on. Step 2 was allies. I called the technician who'd worked on the stove, the repairman who'd checked the water, and the neighbor who walked her dog past our gate every morning. Their stories lined up. Unexplained deliveries, late-night visitors, a car parked outside that no one could account for. I hired a private investigator, expensive but precise. The investigator's camera captured images of Mira meeting a man at a hotel 3 towns over, handing him envelopes, whispering behind the anonymity of hooded umbrellas. Surveillance footage from a nearby hardware store showed her buying equipment that made no sense for a household renovation. The evidence coalesced into a picture that made the knot in my gut tighten into iron. Mira was not merely cheating. She had been trying to make me sick, to isolate me, to create an accident. The thought felt nuclear in scale, so violent and unimaginable that my first instinct was to recoil and pretend I'd misread everything. But I could not unknow what the footage showed. Packages arriving, chemicals ordered under other names, late-night conversations in which phrases like exit strategy and no witnesses were used like a script. Outsmarting someone who believes they've already won requires invisibility. I stopped being the man who needed to prove his pain at every turn. I became quiet, deliberate. I scheduled tests through a different doctor under a false name to avoid tipping her off. I set up discreet cameras in the pantry where those detox lunches were assembled. The footage captured hands, not my hands, sprinkling powder into my tea, the little measured scoops, the casual gestures that made the kitchen choreography a crime scene. Then I did something cruel in its clarity. I let the evidence speak on its own. I sought legal counsel and took the investigator's file to the district attorney. It wasn't vengeance in the cartoon sense, no melodramatic confrontations in the living room, because I'd learned the hard way that human monsters can be slippery when outraged. I handed over the documentation, timestamps, photos, invoices for chemicals, witness statements, and those pantry videos. The DA's eyes were steady as steel. "This is enough to open an investigation," he said. What followed moved faster than I expected. Law enforcement performed controlled tests on the house, swabs from our glassware, residuals hidden behind the spice jars. They found chemical traces consistent with the patterns the specialist had warned about. Mira was arrested quietly one morning while she slept. She woke to handcuffs, shock, the sick, incredulous look of someone who believed herself untouchable. She screamed betrayal and begged, and it was a strange, hollow soundtrack to the justice I'd started. The case didn't explode theatrically on social media. I was careful about privacy for reasons I didn't fully understand then. It did, however, go the legal route. During the investigation and the subsequent hearing, I sat in a chair that felt too big for me and watched evidence be laid out like a careful mosaic. The prosecution didn't need to conjure drama. The videos, receipts, and witness testimonies provided it. The judge issued protective orders, and the DA filed charges not only for attempted poisoning, but for conspiracy, because the hotel invoices and the other man's messages left no room for plausible deniability. Why? People asked later. Friends and family tossed the word around like fertilizer: jealousy, greed, fear of being left behind. Motive in cases like this rarely fits a neat narrative. For Mira, the reasons were tangled: an affair, a plan to extract insurance money, a desire to erase my existence and remold her life. I never heard her version outside the courtroom. I didn't want to. There was a horizon of grief and anger that didn't profit from her explanations. Revenge, for me, never looked like the films I'd once envied. It was not a dramatic showdown or a cruel public shaming. It was a slow, surgical reclamation of safety. The DA's subpoena, the judge's restraining order, the locks changed, the home sanitized by professionals, and the knowledge that I had taken the single most dangerous possible betrayal and turned it into an airtight case. She couldn't ruin me because I had refused to be a victim. I had become the quiet architect of my own rescue. Months later, when the trial concluded and the legal dust settled, people said I'd been fortunate to catch it. I corrected them. I had been painstaking, stubborn, and sometimes cruel in my methods. I had turned fear into paperwork, intuition into evidence. I had been nuclear in my resolve, not in the explosive, violent way the word suggests, but in the transformative force of a decision to survive. The aftermath was messy. Friends drifted, some too embarrassed to choose sides. I moved into a smaller house, sold the car with the dent in the passenger door from the night I almost drove off the cliff, and started therapy to ferret out the parts of me that let someone close to me get so far. I rebuilt a life that tasted safer: less champagne, more small dinners, fewer charity galas, and more morning runs. Mira served time. The other man vanished from our lives in our town. I learned this. The most dangerous betrayals are engineered in whispers and small, repetitive acts that seem inconsequential until they add up to catastrophe. Outsmarting her wasn't about triumph so much as survival. I could tell you that revenge is sweet, and parts of it were. The way she had to answer in court, the way her plans unraveled. But sweeter still was the quiet fact that I woke up one morning and ate breakfast without fear. Nuclear, in the end, wasn't the scale of the plot. It was the potential force of her deceit, capable suddenly of ending everything. Outsmarting her didn't require me to become monstrous. It required me to be meticulous, patient, and relentless. And when the law did its work, the most satisfying thing wasn't her downfall. It was that the house hummed again, not with danger, but with the ordinary, honest noise of a life rebuilt.